Well, it has been such an honor for me to be here. The room where I'm getting ready is just outside of Todd's office, and I see the list of all of the series he's done, and I'm just so grateful. This church is being fed so well by such great teaching. We've enjoyed the area. We're one of those crazy people that got up at 4 a.m. yesterday to see the balloons take off. Totally worth it. Then I get to hear Shania Twain, one of my favorites. But I'll tell you this, I've been in literally hundreds of churches. Nobody in the country does donuts like Sagebrush does donuts. I mean, you guys believe in excellence in every level. So it's been an honor to be here. Wayne Williams grew up a Chicago Cubs fan because that was his dad's favorite team. It was his childhood. They would listen to games on the radio, occasionally watch them or travel to see them. If you know anything about Major League Baseball, you know that for over 100 years, being a Chicago Cubs fan was an exercise in futility. They hadn't won the World Series since 1908. But like true fans do, Wayne and his dad made a pledge when, not if, when the Cubbies made it back to the World Series, they would listen to the games together. And Wayne wouldn't have had it any other way. He couldn't imagine enjoying the World Series without his dad. And so when the Cubs did make it back to the World Series in 2016, it was actually a bit of a bittersweet moment for Wayne. It was bitter because, well, it was sweet because the Cubs were back in the big show. But what was bitter is going to be very difficult for Wayne to keep that promise. See, Wayne now lives in North Carolina. His dad was all the way over to Indiana, but he decided to make the trip anyway. There's another factor even more difficult, and that's the fact that Wayne's dad had died some years prior. But Wayne believed if you make a promise, you keep a promise. So he traveled from North Carolina to Indiana. I have a picture of what he did. Set up a camp chair on his father's grave, opened up his phone, and Wayne and his father listened to the Cubs win the World Series together. Now, I don't know if that story moves you as much as it moves me, but the thought that a guy would take his promise that seriously, when there were 100 reasons why he could say, it doesn't count anymore. It was a sentimental promise made when I'm a boy. My dad isn't even alive. It really doesn't count. But the fact that he believed, no, we said we would do this. I'm going to make it happen as much as I can. That really inspired me. Maybe the notion of a promise kept like that inspired me because God used a promise I had made 38 years ago when I married my wife to transform my marriage. It's a promise many of you likely made if you use traditional vows in the wedding that goes like this. I promise to love and to cherish until death do us part. And I don't know about you, but next few decades went by and I never even thought of the word cherish after that. Madonna reminded me a little bit in the 80s or 90s when her song came out, but didn't pay that much attention. I focused on love. I thought marriage was all about love. This whole notion of cherish just sort of sat off to the side until God brought it back to my mind and I believe convicted me and challenged me. You made this promise. Would you figure out what it means? Would you apply it? And when I did, I was amazed at the power of raising the bar from love to love and cherish in a way that transformed a marriage I already thought was pretty good, but it took it to an entirely different level. And here's what was behind it. Love focuses me on my obligations, which is important. Sacrifice, serve, be committed, persevere, hang in there, good things. But cherish focuses me on the beauty, the excellence, the worthiness of my spouse. I found that there were attitudes, there were actions, there were practices I could put in place that would remind me of this incredible woman I married. And it created an entirely different experience for my wife. And I'll argue here later that it made an entirely different experience for me. I believe it will do the same for you as well. Love is sort of like the bread of marriage. It's essential. I'm not downplaying it at all. It's what is the nourishing part of marriage. It brings substance. But here's the difference. Cherishing is like the jam. It's what makes the love delicious. And so often as a church, we define marriage, a Christian marriage, quantitatively. We're still married. We didn't get divorced. We're hanging in there, just sort of like that. But Cherish says, what about the qualitative aspects of our marriage? Do we truly honor our pledge to love and to cherish? If we have surly attitudes, if there's marriages are marked by contempt, do we honor the God who created us, who delights in this thing we call marriage, if we're just gritting our teeth? I believe God wants to raise the quality of marriages that we have, not just strengthen the quantity of how long they last. Now, some of you are single saying, oh, great, I came to church again. I'm single. Here's another sermon on marriage. Here's why I think it's good for you to be here. If you want to be cherished in marriage, and you do, I believe you will after this, it's good to know what it means to be cherished. It's so easy for singles to sort of, because they want to get married sometimes, and I know it's difficult. Trust me, I talk to so many singles. It's not easy to find someone, at least someone that you would want to marry. But when you know what it is to be cherished, now you have a new standard to look for. So it's not this, well, he's kind of nice to me. He could be worse. No, a jerk looks more like a jerk when you know that a guy is supposed to cherish you. I'm urging you to set the bar a little bit higher and say, if this is what you want, then marry somebody who will do that. But what does it mean then to cherish? I want to help explain that biblically by looking at the Bible's most famous passage on love, 1 Corinthians 13. And compare that to the Song of Songs. Now, it doesn't always use the word cherish, but the concept is there. And I want you to see how cherish takes what love says and just turns it a few degrees, gives it a different angle, and together, it's a beautiful image. So according to 1 Corinthians 13:4, love is about being gracious and altruistic. Love is patient. Love is kind. But cherish is about being enthusiastic and enthralled. How much more pleasing is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your perfume more than any spice. Love tends to be quiet and understated. Love doesn't envy, it doesn't boast. Cherish does boast. It boasts boldly and loudly. My beloved is radiant and ready, outstanding among 10,000. That's a huge boast. You could have 10,000 people, not one of them measures up to my love. Love thinks about others with selflessness. Love is not proud. It doesn't dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. But cherish thinks about its beloved with praise. Your voice is sweet. Your face is lovely. Love doesn't want the worst for someone. Love does not delight in evil, but cherish celebrates the best in someone. How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Love puts up with a lot. Love always hopes, always perseveres, but cherish enjoys a lot. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is altogether lovely. Love is about commitment. Love endures all things. Love never fails, but cherish is about delight and passion. Your name is like perfume poured out. Now you see there that love and cherish don't compete. They complement each other. In fact, without love, cherish won't last. It'll be this sentimental notion. You try it out, but without the strength of love behind it, it'll be like a soap bubble. But here's the thing, without cherish, and this is what I think far too many Christian marriages have settled for, without cherish, love begins to descend more to a discipline, a duty, and a delight. We live less of a marriage than God would have us live. There aren't marriages that speak to the world about the love of God. And they're not marriages that make our wife or husband feel content or ourselves even happy. So to cherish my spouse is to develop certain mindsets, attitudes, and practices that will make me think about her excellence and create an entirely different experience. It's what I love about it because it's the opposite of infatuation. We live in a culture that's infatuated with infatuation. We think that's the high point of a relationship, but if you've ever been infatuated, you know it doesn't last. And it's passive. We even say, well, I fell in love. I was walking around, I fell in love. Cherishing is something that can be chosen. So I want to give a few steps to get there. It's painful to do that, to try to squeeze a book into 33 minutes or even a weekend seminar into that. But I want to at least give you enough of a takeaway to begin to know what it means. So if you want to enter a cherishing marriage, the first thing is to remember your promise. Most of us promise to do this. Are we taking it seriously? what challenged me when God laid this on my heart was, and this broke my heart, if I don't learn what it means to cherish my wife, she will never know what it is to be a cherished wife. Guys, I want you to think about this. Out of all the billions of people on the planet, your wife said yes to you. Do we want to be haphazard about that? Well, of course she did, and maybe if you're really arrogant, or is there that gratefulness where I don't want her to not know? She makes this commitment to me to never really know what it is to be cherished by a husband, because I'm the only person that can do that for her. And so when we marry her, she wants to know more than we simply love her, as important that is. She wants to know, Song of Songs 4:9, you have stolen my heart. My sister, my bride, you have stolen my heart with one glance of your eyes. See, to cherish our wife is to know there's something about her that still stops us, that still arrests us. We've trained our eyes and our minds and our thoughts to cherish her above all others. And so there's just something about her that moves us like no one else does. I'll be honest, I started to cherish my wife because I felt convicted by God that I had made a promise and an act of obedience. He wants me to do it. I owe God that. Okay, fine, I'll do it. And then after I'd written the book, it'd been years of trying to put it into practice, figuring out how this thing works. It's before the book came out, but it was finished. So I'm working in my office. Our master bedroom is just right next to it. I usually wake up a few hours before my wife. And then I heard her waking up and rustling around, and I knew she was going to walk down the hall and come into my office, and that's where she'll usually give me a hug or tell me about her day ahead. And it seems silly to say, I'm almost embarrassed, but the best way to describe it is my heart leapt. Because a favorite person in the world, my favorite person in the world, was awake, and I would get to interact with her, and I'm going to see her. Sometimes that's the favorite part of my day. And after that, I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I realized, because this is so often what happens, and I think you'll find this is true, when God calls you to do something out of obedience and you do it, the blessings can be enormous. We don't necessarily do it because of the blessings, but they're there. God calls us to surrender to good things because he's such a kind and good and awesome God. And it only makes sense to me that if I learn to cherish my wife, that's going to be my favorite part of the day, because my favorite person is alive. Now, I loved my wife throughout our marriage, but I didn't have that reaction the first 10 years of our marriage, even the first 20. It wasn't until I raised the bar to love and cherish that we began to experience that. And it was wonderful. But wives, your husbands want to be cherished too. They might be suspicious of the word. When I was talking to guys writing the book, what does your wife do to make you feel cherished? There'd be this uncomfortableness. They almost look at me like, do I have to turn in my man card if I say I want to be cherished? It doesn't seem like something that guys aspire after. But I'll tell you this, while they may be suspicious of the word, they want the concept. I know a pastor of a large church. He had 7 men that they were sort of leaders, and people would look up to him, and he took them away for a retreat. He just wanted to find out what was going on in the families in his church, and he asked all 7 men, how many of your wives love you? And whoosh, all 7 hands went up. They said, how many of your wives like you? Whoosh, all 7 hands went down. As every man felt loved, he would say, I have a Christian wife. She loves the Lord. She's going to be true to her promise. But at best, she tolerates me. She's not going to leave me, but I'm kind of an annoyance. It just creates a different dynamic in marriage when a guy feels tolerated instead of cherished. It's not a good situation for you, and it's not a good situation for him. Just like you want to hear him say, you have stolen my heart, my sister, my bride. He wants to hear Song of Songs 2:3, like an apple tree among the trees of the forest is my beloved among the young men. What's the point behind that verse? You don't usually see an apple tree in the middle of a forest. The way forests grow, they're all lumber trees. You don't usually see an apple tree. He said there's something different about him. When I see my beloved, everything else just becomes lumber. I don't even notice it. He just stands out above all others. And in a world where men are increasingly taken for granted and not thanked, and they don't always come up well in competition, when a man is cherished by his wife, he's a more affectionate man. He's a committed man. It's unlike any other husband you would know. And the good news is that cherishing our spouse is something that we can learn to do. Because the perfect God who cherishes the imperfect us is more than capable of inspiring us, equipping us, empowering us, and helping us to cherish our imperfect spouse. When you learn to cherish your spouse, it is a supernatural message to the world. I heard Todd's message last week where he said something that shocked me, that 90% of the people in this area haven't yet said yes to Jesus. And I heard his passion. Please bring people. We want to tell them about him. And I urge you, please do that. But we also know, and Todd knows, there are some that will never go inside these walls straight off. But what if we can take Jesus to them by demonstrating cherishing marriages? What if when you're out in the ball fields and the boardrooms and the banks and the schools and the libraries and the coffee shops, and everybody starts noticing every time a husband talks about his wife that way and treats his wife that way, they're from that place called Sagebrush. And every time I see a woman who won't join in the gossip about husbands or tearing down men, but she cherishes her husband, she's from Sagebrush. Maybe we ought to go. Maybe we ought to figure out what they know. And when they do, we can tell them about the God who cherishes them, who helps us to cherish others, which is why cherishing is a great thing. It not only makes you happier and your spouse happier, it's God's witness to the world that there's a new way of relating. We don't have to treat each other with contempt. Marriage doesn't have to die. Jesus will keep our marriages more than alive. Jesus can help our marriages thrive. So we remember our promise. We say we are going to make this happen. The second thing we have to do is change our mindset. Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You all know it. If you want to be different as a Christian, we have to change the way we think about things. Satan is the deceiver. He misleads us. We're hurt by our lack of knowledge. We're confused. We're deceived. If we want to be transformed, we just have to start thinking differently. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. So if I want to change my marriage, I have to change the way I think. And how do I do that? Image I believe God laid at my feet that's been so helpful for me is to go back all the way to the Garden of Eden. The first time Adam looked at Eve. I want you to think about this, guys. One of the things that made their marriage so special is that for a brief period of time, Eve was literally the only woman in the world. There was no one Adam could compare her to. He couldn't say, well, she might be athletic, but she's not quite as brilliant as that one. She doesn't seem to be as pleasant as that one. For all Adam knew, this is what a woman is, and this is a key part, and this is what a woman is supposed to be. He couldn't conceive of a woman being any different than Eve because he had never seen any other woman. He could receive her as a gift from God and cherish her as she is, rather than trying to tear her down because she's not like this wife or that wife. The same thing was true for Eve with Adam. He was the only man in the world. She couldn't say, well, yeah, okay, he works hard, but I wish he could catch a sense of humor. Maybe he could discover what an emotion is and occasionally be willing to talk about it. She didn't know any other husband could be any other way. It was just Adam is what a man is and what a man is supposed to be. Now, you can take it too far. You don't want to use this to excuse abuse or behavior that is just outright not acceptable. But cherishing is based on this commitment to contentment, that on the day I get married, my wife becomes my Eve, the only woman in the world. If you're a woman, your husband becomes your Adam, the only man in the world. Why is that so important? Because comparison is what leads to contempt. Why? We always tend to compare our spouse's weaknesses to another spouse's strengths. It's not a fair comparison. Nobody is complete in themselves. Nobody gets to marry the fourth member of the Trinity, right? Doesn't make any sense in math, doesn't exist in reality. There's a wonderful Christian classic that talks about how God is the only complete being. And one of our frustrations is we try to make others be like God, complete, and nobody can be. Use the example of birds. The peacock is widely observed as the most beautiful of all birds. It's incredible. But have you ever heard a peacock's voice? Yeah, it's painful. It's like nails on a chalkboard. You hear a peacock, you want to say, just shut up and look beautiful, all right? That's your job. That's all you can do. And then there's the blackbird that's not all that much to look at, but have you ever heard a blackbird sing? It's angelic. It's heavenly. Or the trees. If you're hungry, you need something to eat, you go to a fruit tree. You can't build a house with a fruit tree. If you're gonna build a house, you gotta go to the forest. You gotta find a lumber tree. You can't eat off a lumber tree, but you can build a great house. But no tree is everything, no bird is everything. So if you fall in love with a peacock, you're a fan of peacocks. You don't expect your peacock to sing like a blackbird, all right? It's not the whole package. If you fall in love with a fruit tree, sounds kind of funny to say, but you chose him, all right? You don't expect him to be a lumber tree. He's not gonna build your house. You hire somebody else to build your house. He's a fruit tree, all right? You get something entirely different from him. And the same way is when I marry someone, I learn to receive her as she is. She is my Eve, the only woman in the world. And guys, if we really want our wives to feel cherished, we have to come back to Song of Songs 6:9 that says this: my dove, my perfect one, she's the only one. There's no more competition. She doesn't have to compete. The wedding day is the finish line, and she defines for me what a woman is and what a woman is supposed to be. And guys, this verse helps explain why women are often traumatized when they find out their husbands are looking at pornography. They don't want to have to compete with images or airbrush models. They just want to know you will fill your eyes up only with me. If we want our wives to feel cherished, Song of Songs 6:9 has to be what they believe is true. I was speaking at a sacred marriage conference one time at a church about this big. It was a huge church. I was in the green room and they came running in and said, Gary, we forgot to do a mic check. We can't open up the worship center until we do a mic check. Would you please hurry up? And said, sure. So I grabbed my things. I'm running out. And my wife was setting up the book table. Now, we have a book table in the back there. Unfortunately, we sold out of the marriage books. It's ironic. I'm here to talk on marriage, and the only book we have left is When to Walk Away, Finding Freedom from Toxic People. Just sort of the way it works out. But if you go by there just to see my wife, you'll have a reaction like most people do, that we don't look like we belong together, all right? She just looks so much younger than me. We're only 3 years apart, but nobody believes that. In fact, one time she's setting up the book table and somebody said, you must be so proud of your daddy. She goes, I am, but he didn't write these books. I say this just to give a little bit of a defense to a middle-aged woman, because I was walking by Lisa. I didn't have time to stop. They were in a big hurry. And so I just wanted to say hi, so I smiled, and I patted her rear end as I went by, which she doesn't mind, right? If I know some wives hate that. If Lisa hated it, I wouldn't do it. She, for whatever reason, likes it, and I like that she likes it, frankly, but I'm not saying every wife should be that way. So I just go by there and pat her and smile, and we go off. And this middle-aged woman sees it. She gets this nasty look on her face. She marches up to my wife. Is that Gary Thomas? And Lisa's kind of taken back by the force. Yeah? Are you his wife? You know, and Lisa just felt like I was being insulted. If you meet my wife, she's so sweet. She wouldn't hardly ever respond this way, but she said it just kind of came out. No, he was with his wife last weekend. This weekend it's my turn. She's just having fun with her. And I go, honey, you can't say that. She goes, but Gary, that's not you. In a million years, that's never who you've been or who you. I go, yeah, but read the newspapers. All right, it happened. She doesn't know me. She did straighten it up. She said, I'm just having fun with you. Of course, that's my husband. And they just explained that, no, I'm not his second wife. We got married, all of this. But she had this expectation, which was true and right. You only talk to your wife that way. You only touch your wife that way. And as a church, we have this notion, and I think it's true. Yeah, I got to be careful with my hands, just my wife, my eyes, just my wife. I'm saying I want to have the same standard for my mind. I don't want to think about my wife this way. I'm not going to compare her. I'm going to have a commitment to contentment. She is my Eve, the only one in the world, because I want her to feel cherished. So I remember my promise. I make a new mindset, and the third thing I do, and this, it's hard to choose because there's like 15 things you could put into practice here, but the one I want to focus on this morning is that to cherish your spouse, you learn to showcase your spouse. You showcase. What does showcase mean? You show it off. If you cherish something, you want to show it off. Have you ever seen the newly engaged woman who kind of walks around like this, hoping that people will notice the ring because she cherishes it, she wants people to see it? A guy that's really into cars puts the picture on Facebook. You go to his, hey, you got to come out and see my baby. I remember for years I endured new grandparents that would just shove pictures of their grandkids in front of my face. And I'm like, I don't know why you think that baby is all that special. I mean, it just looks like it's a baby. I mean, I'm sure she's special to you. I'm not sure I'd put her on a Gerber baby bottle or something. I mean, I wouldn't actually say that, but. And then I became a grandparent. And it was so overwhelming. There's no way I'm going to pass up a chance to show thousands of people this adorable, cute. How do you not cherish a little girl that looks that gorgeous and beautiful? See, if you cherish someone, you want to show them off. And this was transforming for me in my marriage. I got married young. I had a very immature attitude. Is my wife going to appreciate me? Is my wife going to notice me? Is my wife going to praise me? You can't control that. But I can wake up and say, if I've cultivated these attitudes of cherishing my wife, I want others to appreciate her too. It could be her beauty, it could be her wisdom, it could be her understanding, it could be her business skills, whatever it might be. I want to show her off so that others can appreciate it as well. There's a great analogy from the ballet community. George Balanchine is one of the most famous choreographers ever, and he actually started out as a dancer. And he had this phrase called, "The ballet is woman." And what he means by that is that when you go to the ballet, you go to see the ballerina. It's her grace and strength and athleticism and beauty that you go to see. And so if it's couples dancing, the choreographers are looking for male dancers that aren't going to try to steal the show with their muscles or their moves. They're happy just to support her, to turn her, to lift her up, to put her in the spotlight. Because a ballerina with a supportive partner, I mean, it's just physics, can do far more than a dancer on her own, and that's his job. She's the star of the show, and he wants everyone to see her. What if we had that attitude in our marriages? Now, it doesn't have to be gender-based. Wives can do this for their husbands as well. But I've put together some clips from a documentary on the New York Ballet Company that Sarah Jessica Parker narrates. And I want you to watch it and just think, what would it be like to be married to someone who has the attitude of a male dancer? That my job is to support her, to display her beauty. What if wives did that for their husbands? What if husbands did that for their wives? Take a watch.
When a male dancer is paired with a ballerina, he can support, stabilize, lift, and turn her, allowing the partner to perform feats she could never do alone.
One of my favorite parts of dancing is partnering. I love having a connection with someone on stage.
There's this saying we have that ballet is woman. The best thing I can do as a partner is to kind of disappear and make sure that everybody in the audience is enjoying her performance.
Because it's not about you. It's about making the woman look beautiful.
It takes true artistry to make a woman feel that safe on stage while she's trying to do all these different things. You just have to have that trust.
It's not always perfect or safe, but usually they'll catch you before your head hits the ground.
Usually.
So, well, I got dropped on my head once, but
Partnering's a lot about confidence, and you have to go for things, because if you don't go for it, then it doesn't work out.
Right, yeah.
And a lot of these lifts I've never done before, and they're kind of scary. I'm sort of afraid of heights. With Craig, I'm not afraid at all. Well, I know he's not gonna drop me, right?
Yeah, not yet.
If that was my daughter, I'd want Craig to be a little more certain. Yes, I'm not going to drop her. But just think about the transforming work of this in your marriage. What I found, I got so many stories in the books where husbands were changed when they were cherished by their wife. Wives became the best version of themselves, is how one woman described it, when they were cherished by their husband. There's just this spiritual principle that when you are cherished by the person that matters most to you, you will step out in the world. You'll take risks. You'll take chances that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise, because what's most important, that the one who knows you best and loves you most cherishes you, that's what creates the climate for us to flourish. Which means if you're frustrated with your spouse now, learn to cherish them, and they're likely to become a better spouse, a more complete person, a more excellent person. And what I love about this is when I showcase my spouse, others notice her strengths. That makes me cherish her even more, so I showcase her more. It makes others cherish her more, and it's this stair step, the opposite of infatuation that starts out white hot and then tanks. Cherishing gradually grows. Now, I've been around a long time. I've talked to a lot of people, and what happens is contempt can start to color our glasses, so we don't even see the strengths of our spouses. I've seen it in counseling. Some wives that have amazing husbands, and they think every husband goes with his family to church. Every husband will work hard to provide for the family. Every husband is committed. I'm like, no, I could give you a long list of guys that don't, but it just becomes a status quo. And they take it for granted. They don't see the strengths, they see the disappointments. And I see these wives that are amazing, heroically loving their families. There's incredible daughter-in-laws. They even are so great to the husband's mom. And guys just say, well, that's the way women are. No, that's not the way always. That's the way your wife is. But we just stop to see. It's just this human thing where we just take blessings for granted. But we're so sensitive to everything that disappoints us. So how do you get over that? Well, the first thing you may have to do is showcase your spouse to yourself. Remind yourself of your spouse's excellence. And one of the ways that you do that, I got a journal one year. I took this idea from someone else, and there was a blank page for every day of the year. It was going to be my wife's Christmas present, and every day I would write down something specifically I could thank my wife for, or something I appreciated about her. And I did that every day. I determined before I did any work in the morning, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna fill in that entry. I wouldn't do any work, and it was fine for 30 days, 60 days. You get to 90 days, you can't write the same things. And now I'm having to pause and try to think back. And then even throughout the next day, I say, okay, I've got to write something. I'm scanning my wife for things that I can thank or praise in that journal the next day. What do you think it does to a man's mind? What do you think it would do to a woman's mind when the first thought every morning is, God, show me what I can thank my spouse for, or what I most treasure about my spouse? Doing that for a year, which may seem excessive to some of you. I'm not clinically OCD, but I kind of live in the neighborhood right next door to it, so I've been known to go there. But it was a dramatic transformation of my marriage to remind me to be newly sensitive to the wonders of my spouse. I want to end with the story of a guy, because I know a lot of you are hearing this, and some of you are thinking, this sounds great. I'd love to have this kind of marriage if I could start over with someone else. It sounds wonderful. Let me tell you the story of a guy who got that chance, and his words might challenge you. I met him in Winnipeg. It was in February, which I don't imagine anybody should go to Winnipeg in February. Even in Canada, they call it Winterpeg. But because it was so icy and cold, he had to drive really slow on the way home. He was taking me from a convention center to the hotel where I was staying. He said, Gary, you have no idea how true your words are. And he told me what went on in his two marriages. His first marriage was a pretty traditional marriage. He loved his wife. He was a good husband. She was a good wife. They had traditional roles, and things were fine. But about 16 years or so into their marriage, she started to get sick. The last 8 months, she was dying. So he had to do everything. cooking, cleaning, shopping, because when someone you love is dying, it's what you do. She passed away, and he lived 4 years as a single man. Then he started dating another woman who had never married. And he decided to ask her to marry him, and he made this decision. He says, Gary, I decided I would treat my second wife like I treated my first wife the last 8 months of our marriage. And I've been single for 4 years. I'll just keep doing what I did before. And I want to call my second wife princess, so I remind myself to treat her like a princess. And he goes, I got to tell you this, Gary. Eventually, very sadly, she also died after about 15 years. But he looks back at those 2 marriages, and he said, Gary, and he said, tears in his eyes, he goes, Gary, my second marriage was deeper and richer and even happier than my first marriage. Not because my second wife was better than my first wife. She really wasn't. In terms of pleasantness of personality and spiritual maturity and relational ability, they were about the same. But the difference is, while I loved my first wife, I decided to love and cherish my second wife, and it made all the difference. And so you can hear this sermon, and it might convict you, and you say, well, if I was married to someone else, this sounds so great. But Terry would say, you don't need a new spouse. Maybe you need a new attitude, that it's possible you could leave this place today with the same spouse and start to build an entirely different marriage when you raise the bar from love to love and cherish. Let's pray. Father, thank you for cherishing us. Your son died for us while we were yet sinners. You didn't wait for us to get our act together. Your relationship with us is based on mercy, and you cherished us. And out of that, you have called us to be new people. And our marriages can be the same. Lord, I pray just as we go forward from here, your Spirit would be our teacher, our counselor, our comforter. Remind us of what we've promised. Help us change the way we think. And let us zealously showcase our spouse, Lord, as you seek to showcase us. We praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.